Our speaker today is a volunteer leader in the John Birch Society, someone when I was coordinator up in Oklahoma I heard about and learned a lot about later and read a lot of his material. He will be presenting to us how to influence allies. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Charlie Meadows.
I was hoping I might get away with some of the Oklahoma folks not being in here today. Wait just a second. You took a little more than that. Something we learned not to ever do is set your materials down and someone else come along and get them there. Now I have to stay honest because some folks in here know me. But I do want to introduce my wife to you. My wife's up here on the front row, Linda Meadows. And more than she can ever know, I would not be standing here in front of you today without her contributions to our family that allows me to have the time to volunteer to do some of the activities that I do, and I truly thank you for that, hon. I also consider this one of the really privileges of my entire 62 years now. It's quite an honor to be asked to come and be one of the speakers at the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Birch Society. So I'm really thrilled about that. What I want to talk about today is working with others to influence local government and all at the same time to have fun birching. And so I'm going to talk about a local political organization. Now you must understand the Birch Society is non-political. They never endorse a candidate, never endorse a political party. And the Birch Society's focus is more on national and international issues. And so about 9 years ago, and I won't get into that yet, we decided to form a local issue primarily pointed toward the state of Oklahoma, an organization where Birchers and others could be members to really try to affect our state legislature. But it's a two-pronged effect. Not only do we want to improve the quality of the lawmakers in the state, we also want to educate the citizens of the state because ultimately that's where it's at. The more you can build into the minds and the mentality of people the ideals of liberty and sound economics and things like that, the better quality of lawmakers that you will have at your state legislature and the better quality of lawmakers you will eventually end up with in the United States Congress. So we formed a very hardcore political organization called the Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself before I really get into explaining how this works and how we tie it all together. Probably 34 years ago when I really had my come to Jesus meeting and I began to get really serious about a walk with the Lord. I lived under the position or the philosophy that don't you dare spend your time wasting your time in politics or government. You spend all of your time in spiritual warfare. And what I understood that to be at the time was I needed to walk a righteous walk of salvation and I needed to help others do that same thing. And I was pretty good at convincing people, you let these governments or kingdoms of the world go where they're going to go anyway. Then I started 25 years ago, and I'm kind of thankful for that because I really was focused, as Ed Welch talked to us about. I was really focused on my Christianity and building a strong understanding of God's Word. But about 25 years ago, I began to listen to a radio program out of Dallas, Texas, called Point of View, International Christian Media, with Marlon Maddox. And God bless his soul, I miss him. He's been gone about 4 years now, something to that nature. And day after day, week after week, I would hear any number of guests on every subject that you can think of. It was an issue-related program, not necessarily current event. It wasn't event-driven at the time. It's become a little more so now. And I was listening one Wednesday, and Marlon was talking about the next couple of days, and he said, this Friday we're going to have the spokesman for the John Birch Society on. His name is John F. McManus. Well, I had this somewhere in the dark recesses of my mind that there's a problem with the Birch Society, so don't think I'm going to listen on Friday. Now, you couldn't have asked me what that problem was. I couldn't even start to tell you what it was. It was just a negative impression. But I was addicted, and so Friday comes along, and I've got to listen. And I began to listen to Mr. McManus, and I thought, well, this guy makes a lot of sense. And that opened my mind, and then we had an American Opinion bookstore in Oklahoma City. I'm a window cleaner and have been for 34 or 5 years now. And I also did a little janitorial work in the earlier days, and I used to carry out trash from one of my businesses right past the New Americans or the American Opinion bookstore and put it in the dumpster and walk back, and I'd see books in the so pretty soon I snuck in the bookstore. And there was a fellow by the name of Tom Ragsdale, and somebody just walking in, that was like saying, sick 'em to a dog to Tom. And he was ready to start. And he began to work on me, and I'm very grateful for that. So that was the beginnings. In 1990, I ran for the state Senate. Ran in a district with only 21% Republican registration. I was running as a Republican. The party told me you have no chance to win if you don't have at least 25% registration in the district. And I want to inform you, I came in second in a two-man race. But I did obtain almost 44% of the vote, which surprised a lot of people. And it was a very difficult race. I met a lot of friends, and one of them was a man by the name of Tim Green, who eventually ran for the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, he did not win in the primary. And then Tim became a Bircher. But the year after I ran, in 1991, Tim came to me and said, Charlie, I want to run for the state chairman of the Republican Party, and I would like for you to be my campaign manager. And I did my best to talk him out of it, but unsuccessfully, so I agreed to do so. And Tim and I began to meet together on Wednesdays at lunch to plan out an agenda for how we were going to win this program, win this race for state chairman. And invariably, our luncheons would break down after a little strategy into discussion of issues and fellowship, and we really enjoyed it. So one day I said, Tim, why don't we invite a few more guys? And he said, hey, great idea. So next week it was 3, and then 4. Now what I'm trying to relate to you is how we got to where we are today. And I'm going to explain our accomplishments later. But I want you to understand, we built relationships, friendships, and it's very important, and we had fun doing it all along. It was not burdensome. And I predict that almost everyone in here is going to eat lunch almost every day of the week, somewhere. So it's a great opportunity to do that. So we began to meet, and it just kept growing and got larger and larger. And we didn't win that race. We did pretty well, again, about 44, 45% of the vote. But anyway, we just kept going afterwards. And we kept meeting. And pretty soon, all over the United States, there popped up rush rooms. And I don't know if you ever had one in your community, but what they would do is pipe in live programming. Ours was delayed in Oklahoma City. Live programming for the Rush Limbaugh. And the restaurants that would have these programs, they would have a menu kind of geared to the program. For example, a Teddy Kennedy special was 2 pieces of white bread with nothing in between. And then you had other things. Well, pretty soon, Rush Limbaugh had his TV program, and they showed it in Oklahoma City from 11:30 in the morning until noon. And we just kept getting larger and larger. And we would hoot and holler and have fun watching that, and turn it off, and we'd discuss issues. And so we became a debating society, and Rush went off in a year. And by the way, we realized we were a lot more conservative than Rush, and so we called ourselves several things. We called ourselves the Wednesday Lunch Bunch and the Rush Bunch, and then pretty soon we actually had bumper stickers made up, the Right of Rush Room, because we realized we were right of Rush. And so at debating societies, and this was really good for us, we'd bring articles. And, I was taking the New American, and guess where a lot of my articles came from? And we'd copy them. We'd pass them out to one another, and we'd discuss them. And we learned some valuable things. We learned how to promote those things and defend those things that we believed. And we also learned how to contend with others without being rancorous and without being, such a difficult person to live with. And that was very good training. And we just continued to grow. And as long as we had a table that would hold maybe 12 or 14, we could all gather around the table. But when we got up to 18 and 20, and the table kept getting longer, I noticed that we were losing our identity as one group when we started breaking down into subgroups of communication. And so eventually, we had a gubernatorial contest in Oklahoma, and Frank Keating was running on his first term. He wanted to come speak to us. His opponent wanted to come speak to us. And so we had a few ladies start coming, and that's fine. We never were trying to keep them out. But we just kept growing, and so pretty soon we moved more toward a speaker format, because on a really large group, it's hard to have a debating society on that. So we finally came to a place that we realized two things were happening in the state of Oklahoma. We were looking at term limits coming up in the next couple of election cycles, and we had also realized in our observation that we had a core of really strong conservatives, particularly in the state house. And I got to thinking, if we could add a few to this core of conservatives in the next election cycle and then the one after that, then when term limits came in, and within 4 years we were going to really turn over the majority of our state legislature, maybe we could come up with a conservative majority in the Republican caucus, primarily in the House. The Senate was so far gone, we had very little hope for the Senate, to be honest with you. So I proposed to our group, our Wednesday lunch bunch, that we, debating societies have a lot of fun, but they never accomplish anything. So I propose we actually form an organization with a purpose and with an agenda. And that seemed to be acceptable to most of the people. So we formed this group called OAKPAC. That stands for the Oklahoma Conservative Political Action Committee. I want to read our one-paragraph mission statement. To promote and support constitutionalists in the state legislature who oppose expansive government while at the same time promote liberty, free market economics, and Judeo-Christian standards. Pretty short, and that was our purpose. We weren't ashamed of the Judeo-Christian part of that. So we formed that. And in our first election cycle, we raised the whopping sum of $4,000. And we gave 4 $1,000 contributions. One of them went to a state Senate candidate by the name of Jim Reynolds. And there had never been a Republican ever win this seat before. In fact, the most a Republican had ever received in this district was about 43% of the vote. And we took a chance on Jim because you must understand, we're not looking for winners. It's fairly easy to pick winners. We're looking for really quality people that we can help win, and there's a difference to that. And we took a chance on Jim, and we gave him our $1,000 contribution for outstanding Senate candidate. And he won with 51.5% of the vote. And he did that on $28,000, so we were 1/28th of all of his money. Now, another thing I need to tell you, too, at this point in time, as of this past Wednesday, somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 years that we have been meeting, and we have missed one Wednesday in 17 years. Approximately 5 years ago, Christmas Day fell on a Wednesday. That's the only time that Christmas Day has been on a Wednesday in the past 17 years. I just looked it up a little bit. That's about 885 consecutive Wednesdays that we've met minus one. The consistency of that is very important for this type of an organization, because what happens is, we're creatures of habit. And so when Wednesday comes along, it's just habit. Let's go to OAKPAC. That's where we're going to go meet. So that's kind of how we got started. Now I want to tell you a little bit about what we've accomplished, and then I want to relate the tools that have helped us to get there. Today in the state of Oklahoma, we're the largest, most active club in the state. You can ask any candidate that runs for a statewide office that goes everywhere in the state, we're the biggest. We meet every Wednesday, as I told you, and that's very consistent. This year, let me back up. That first election cycle, which was 2000, we raised $4,000. 2 years later, we raised $8,500. 2 years later, which would have been 2004, we raised $24,000. And 2006, we raised $31,000. And this year, we have raised $33,000 at this point in time. We have our largest number of dues-paying members, all-time high, 196 dues-paying members, and those dump each year, and we have to start over each year. In other words, over 5 election cycles, we've raised about $100,000. Prior to this year, we had contributed to 56 candidates. 28 of them have been elected to the state legislature. Now, we've become fairly well known in the state of Oklahoma. At the recent state convention held earlier this year, there were a group of people, they call themselves, "Are you a concerned Republican?" Concerned that the libertarians are taking over the Republican Party. We have but 2 options, to do something or to do nothing. And there are 4 different groups that they criticize, or 4 different situations. I'm just going to read 2 of them. I've got packets, front and the back. You can pick them up on the way out. Here's one regarding OakPack. These people are libertarian conservatives, not Republican conservatives. Excerpt from a letter from Charlie Meadows, leader of OakPack. Quote, "That's what I like about Ron Paul's tax plan. It just gets rid of the IRS, and that's it. Don't think it could happen? Don't think Ron Paul has a chance? He won't have a chance if you keep thinking like that. But I am convinced that Ron Paul is the best candidate. Send the country a positive message on February 5th. Vote for Ron Paul and get a free country. Sincerely, Charlie Meadows." Over in the right-hand corner, John Birch Society, 50th anniversary. Congressman Ron Paul has endorsed the John Birch Society in a statement recently received from his office. Dr. Paul stated, quote, "The John Birch Society is a great patriotic organization featuring an educational program solidly based on constitutional principles. I congratulate the society in this, its 50th year. I wish them continued success and endorse their untiring efforts to foster less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world." Okay? There's 2 more. I'm not going to take the time to read them. But let me read you what they say about all this. These groups are interconnected. They have a political machine in place. They won't stop even if Ron Paul goes away. They have infiltrated the Republican Party, and now they are trying to take it over. They have the means. They have their motives. All they need is the right opportunity. One of the things that we do, and I'll explain it to you here, is we come up with we work on creating a conservative index for the performance of the state legislators. And then our group works on creating a ranking of that index. We have this little thing called a rhino program. Now, a lot of you have been to zoos and you think you know what a rhino is, but you really don't. Okay, I'm going to show you what a rhino is. Here it is right here. It's a donkey with elephant ears pinned behind its ears and an elephant nose taped onto the end of that donkey. That's what a rhino is. So there's a little process to creating this. And on 4th of July this year, based on an email that I sent out, the front page of the Tulsa Beacon had this front page article. Brogdon, would you stand up, Senator Randy Brogdon from Oklahoma? Brogdon named top conservative, Watson named as a rhino. And what they do is they've picked 6 of our best, and then down here, the winner in the Senate and the House of our Rhino Award, plus a local Tulsan who was nominated for the Rhino Award. Again, that's really helpful when you begin to expand with the knowledge and understanding like that. Some of the things that we do at OAKPAC is we lobby. We're citizen lobbyists. We're not paid, and because we're not paid, we don't have to register as a lobbyist. Just give you a couple of examples. Last year, as we were trying to educate the members of the House and the Senate on this thing called the NAFTA Superhighway and this attempt to create a North American Union, I called on several people, mostly Birchers, mostly members of OAKPAC, members of OK Safe, probably a couple other organizations, 10, 12 people. And we went down to the Capitol, and the way we fashion things at the Capitol, we take a bullet point, a cover sheet that has just a few bullets. And then we have underlined support documentation for that. And we go up to a lawmaker and we say, we're opposed to this issue or opposed to this bill or we support it. Here's the reason why. You can read these bullet points. And if you want to know more later, you can research it deeper. A lot of them will never get past that first page. But if it's brief enough, you've given many of them enough information to base their information on. And the ones that want to go deeper, it's there for them. Now, the first issue of the New American that came out that talked about the North American Union, it was the issue that preceded the NAFTA issue. We distributed that issue to every lawmaker in the state. Then eventually we distributed all the NAFTA issues to them. Then eventually, this more modern, recent issue that's out here on the table, we distributed that to them also. And we try to do this one-on-one. Sometimes it's hard to catch them. There are committees and all kinds of things. Sometimes you leave them with the legislative assistant or executive assistant, but we try to talk with those lawmakers. That's been very effective. And with the leadership of Senator Brogdon, and if you've heard him talk, you may have heard about this, we were successful in killing legislation which would have enabled the NAFTA Superhighway to cross the Red River. And Senator Brogdon is fairly famous by saying that if you insist upon building that thing up to the Red River, then we want a U-turn where it turns around and goes back. And so we're very thankful. Another thing is we're known as Charlie's Rent-A-Mob. Actually, we do rally work when rallies are needed. A few years ago, we had a corrupt agency head in the Oklahoma State Health Department. The FBI went in one day, and they put the cuffs on him and took him out, and Governor Keating had a replacement for him to walk in immediately. Well, this replacement was named Jerry Regier. And Jerry went in there, and he hired 4 retired FBI agents, and they began to investigate along with a member of OAKPAC, borrowed from another agency. And in 2 weeks, they went farther and deeper into uncovering corruption than the establishment ever thought could happen, and they began to get worried. So they began a move to try to get Regier out. So our OAKPAC member came and told us what was going on and said, we've got to have a rally. So that commission met, and we were down across the street with our picket signs. Keep Regier for a year. Clean up corruption. And guess what? We had contacted all the press, all the TV stations, newspaper, radios that were out there, and we raised the profile of that so much that they had to keep Regier for a year. And that was really helpful. This year earlier, State Representative Sally Kern was making a speech. I think the first place she delivered it was at OAKPAC. She delivered this speech 4 times. And she was talking about the influence of Tim Gill, the billionaire from Colorado, .com billionaire, along with several others, that are homosexuals, or at least amenable to the homosexual agenda. And they are putting huge sums of their money into an effort to take out lawmakers primarily on a state and local basis, not so much at the federal level. And in fact, 2 years ago, they targeted 70 and took 50 of them out. And she was making this speech, and she said, you know, this agenda or these people are more dangerous than the terrorist. And someone was in there with a tape recorder and taped it. And pretty soon it's on YouTube, and pretty soon it's a national controversy. I don't know if any of you heard about it. But Sally got probably 20,000 emails and phone calls, hate, threats on her life, all kinds of things, from all over the United States, even from all over the world. And we decided we would work together with several other groups, and we'd have a rally for Sally, and we turned out about 3,500 people at a weekday at lunch at a rally for Sally. And it was really a wonderful thing. In February of this year, Vicente Fox came to Oklahoma City to promote his globalist agenda. So I put out an email, as long as some other groups that we work with, put out an email. And back up just a little bit, we had a bill that we passed the year before, which is considered by many the toughest bill in the nation on this invasion of illegal aliens for a state to deal with it themselves. And it's a very controversial bill. The wealthiest people in the state chamber types, they are so opposed to it, they're doing everything they can to destroy this bill. So a camera crew came up from Dallas to interview State Representative Randy Terrell and then myself about this bill. They called me up to arrange the interview, and I said, well, come tomorrow. I'll be picketing Vicente Fox tomorrow. And so they showed up, and it was just wonderful. It was February. It was sleet, rain, snow, blowing wind. And if you've ever been in Oklahoma and know what it's cold and windy and wet like, you know it can be a little raw and a little harsh. And we had about 35 show up in those conditions. And we're out there with our picket signs. And I did one interview regarding HB 1804. Then I changed signs, and then I did another one doing that. I did 2 or 3 more there, and we picketed Vicente Fox. And you know, we had cases of the New American, thank you Clark Curry back here, had ordered in cases of the New American magazine on the NAFTA Superhighway. And when those people came out from Vicente Fox, we were handing these out saying, here's the other side of the story. Here's the other side of the story. Then we hopped in our vehicles and went to Tulsa because he was speaking up there. And we were joined by an even greater group up there, and it was 2 degrees warmer. And intermittent rain, sleet, and snow up there. It was quite a deal. So those are some of the activities that we use. One of our greatest tools is the Oak Pack email. Now, this is I describe this as conservative commentary and insider information about Oklahoma politics, government, and the culture war, designed to make you to inform you as well as make you think. Right now we have over 2,500 people on this email list that get it directly. God only knows how far the thing goes out. It's probably the most important tool that we have, and perhaps the one that some in the establishment fear the most, even more so than our regular Wednesday lunch meetings. At Wednesday, we regularly have 40 to 70, 75 people every Wednesday. A group like this, maybe a little larger, maybe a little smaller. This room holds 60, I think. Our record size is about 135. Occasionally we'll get up to 90 to 100. That's every week. That's every Wednesday. We've got a core of about 25 that are there almost every week. And if there's another 25 there one week, none of them be there the next week, and a different 25 will be there because it feeds off of this large email list. So we have this email, and I'll just give you an example. On the 16th of September of this year, the Birch Society joined with 49 other organizations in the United States and Canada in what was called the Sledgehammer Effort. And this was designed for all these organizations were to contact their members and urge them to call their United States congressman or their parliamentarian in Canada, whatever they call them, and urge them to oppose the NAFTA Superhighway, the North American Union, urge them to stand up for the Constitution of which they take their oath, and to urge them to support HCR 40 by Virgil Goode, the congressional bill that had 50 co-sponsors, 2 from Oklahoma, my Congressman Lucas and John Sullivan from Tulsa. So there had been, prior to that, a little email and a letter in the editor of the Daily Oklahoman by former state representative Thad Bachman. And he was attacking Jerome Corsi and suggesting that people that thought that there was a North American Union attempt to be built in a superhighway were delirious and other such adjectives. Well, Senator Brogdon wrote an excellent response to that. Now, you know, almost no one reads newspapers anymore. And so I took those two letters and I called it the dueling letters between Bachman and Brogdon. And I hit the high points in those, and then I went after Bachman. And I suggested, you know, if he just had a little better historical education and understood how the North American Union came about, and if he understood this, and that maybe he wouldn't be so ignorant in the situation or whatever it was. Well, I then went from that little deal to this Sledgehammer Day and urged people to contact our 3 U.S. representatives that had not signed on as yet, and urged them to make their calls. And here's one of the things I do. I turn down most requests to send out calls and emails. I have promised my people I will never ask you to do something if it's not really important. But if I ask you to do it, I really need you to do it. And so I sent that email out. And that night I got away from the house and didn't have my numbers with me. I couldn't make the call that day myself. That night at our Birch meeting, and several of our members had called in. And guess what? The phones had been ringing off the wall there. Anyone who called, they knew what they were calling about. So the next morning, Constitution Day, by the way, I made my call just before the Oak Pack luncheon. And they forwarded me to the Washington office. Said, you need to talk to so-and-so. And he was out for lunch, and I understand that. They said, well, have him call you back. I turned my phone off because we were starting our meeting, and as I frequently do, I forget to turn it back on after the meeting. I got home, got online that night, and I had an email from the Chief of Staff in Washington through the local office. I checked my phone. I had 2 calls from the Chief of Staff. They were informing me that U.S. Congresswoman Mary Fallon had decided to become a co-sponsor of H.C.R. 40, Virgil Good's bill. One of the tools that we use is the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper. This has been in publication for 29 years now. It is the only thing in the state of Oklahoma that ranks the legislature on a conservative liberal basis. The index was actually started 30 years ago by Bill Cherry, right over here on the left side of the room. He got transferred out of the state. He gave the index to the fellows that own this, and they've never missed with it since. Every year toward the end of the session, I hand deliver to every Republican lawmaker in both the Senate and state an opportunity for them to contribute bills that should be used in this index. And on top of that, instructions of when they have to have that in and a particular date that they're invited to our Oak Pack meeting to debate whether or not that issue is clearly reflective of a conservative and liberal basis. So don't whine and cry in your milk if you don't score good, if you didn't show up. We've had as many as 15. I think this year we had 7 or 8 that showed up. And these are lively debate weeks when this happens. It's very educational for them, very educational for us. And after that meeting occurs, then the 2 fellows that own this paper, who both of them take the New American, and one of them is a member of the Birch Society, I don't know about the other one. They then turn around and take everything that's been finalized to that point, they bring it to our members, and our members vote to determine which 10 are used in this particular issue. So this is something that we really use, and it's very valuable. Before Oak Pack came along, a lawmaker would read it and they'd say, oh, that's interesting, and throw it away. Because it had no teeth in it. I guess I might need this here. They'd throw it away because it had no teeth in it. But what we've come up with for incumbents is what we call our accountability effort. It's a Rhino program. And it basically goes like this. We're not asking you for ideological purity. We'd just like to see you score about a 60 or higher on it. And if you do that, you're hands off. If you don't, you could get some trouble from us. And here's the trouble. If you get a Republican opponent, we will interview that opponent, and if they're conservative, we'll support the Republican opponent. Now, twice we've tried to take an incumbent out, and we couldn't do it. But I'm going to tell you, 4 years ago, in my personal state House seat, we had the largest primary in the state, 6 candidates. A 28-year-old man, homeschooled, got 44% of the vote out of 6 in a primary. The 4 losers signed up with the guy that got 23%. The hospital put out a postcard to everyone in the state saying if Murphy's elected, the hospital will close and people will die. And the ophthalmologist put out postcards with Al's used car surgery center for your eye and said if Murphy's elected, people will be operated on by junkyard dealers, excuse me. And then some people in our county that don't like us put out 4 postcards, and I didn't realize what an evil criminal that Jason Murphy was. And he ended up losing about 53-47. Well, Dale DePue, the fellow that got in there, he was a nice fellow, and just by 2 points missed getting on the Rhino list. He's a moderate, nice fellow. No leadership, followership. Okay, what do you want me to do, leadership in the House? I'll do whatever you want me to do. And so Jason Murphy decided to run against him again in 2006. But because he missed our Rhino list, we couldn't help him with PAC money. But guess what? I had him come speak at Oak PAC. And I stood up and I said, for every one of you that will make a contribution today, I'll give $10, up to 10 of you. And someone else did the same thing. We raised over $1,000 for him that day. And then I sent out a letter, and we raised 70% of the money that he used. Now, you got to understand Oklahoma politics. I told you 4,000, 24 and all. Jason Murphy came within 29 votes of taking him out in the primary on $7,000. Dale spent $50,000. And then Jason came back on $4,000 more and took him out in the primary runoff. $11,000, and we've changed out a lawmaker that, gosh, I hate to do this, Senator Brogdon, now that you're here, but Senator Brogdon's lifetime score on the conservative index is a 94, and Jason Murphy's is a 100. Jason Murphy of the 101 state lawmakers in the House and the 48 senators in the Senate has the highest average score of anyone in the state legislature. He's an outstanding, brilliant young man, and he has tremendous leadership abilities. Now, if he can still have 100 by the time he's been in 6 years as Senator Brogdon has, that will be a remarkable feat, because you've only missed about 1 or 2 votes, and 1 vote in 6 years. Out of 60, he's only missed 1. That was your first year. Another thing that happens, too, is I regularly get calls, particularly during the session, from about 20 lawmakers. They call me up and say, Charlie, what would be the conservative perspective on this issue? Another thing that happens on the floor of the state legislature, particularly in the House, when these guys are in a row, I'm just talking about the Republicans, all of a sudden they begin to say, some of our good buddies say, this is going to be an index vote, this is going to be an index vote. And you'd be surprised at some of this kind right here, when they think it's going to be an index vote, they change and vote the right way, whether they really believe in it or not. Okay? Another thing that we do every single week, every speaker that comes to Oak PAC, we give them 3 things. We give them The Law by Frederick Bastiat. I just bought a new case. It's our 15th case. 1,500 of these have we distributed. We give them a copy of the Davy Crockett story, It's Not Yours to Give. And we give them a copy of Robert Welch's Republics and Democracies. I'm going to tell you one of the reasons that Senator Brogdon is such a great candidate. When he came and interviewed for us, before us, the next week we voted, and he received our major support. And I called him up to tell him. He'd already read the book. He said, I sat down at dinner with my wife, and I told her, I said, Donna, if we govern more like this would be a different nation. You want to know why he's a great lawmaker? He educates himself. He prepares himself. The fact that he's here, not only as a speaker, but he's here as a learner, is an example of that. And I'll tell you, we've got a pretty good group. Another thing that's really important in this interview process that we do, we have 10 questions, and we ask these candidates to answer this. And we're not asking on a particular issue, how would you vote on this bill or that bill? We're searching for their core values. And we make them come and speak before us. We want to know their passion and their speaking abilities. Let me just give you an example. Which opposing strategy for economic growth will you support at the exclusion of others? Central planning, direct subsidies or tax credits like Oklahoma's Quality Jobs Act? Or cutting taxes and reducing business regulations? Or another? Give an example. Here's one here. I'll go into this. For each situation below, please place one or more letters for the particular type of capitalism. A, for fascist capitalism. B, free market capitalism. Or C, for socialist capitalism. And this is brand new, by the way. Nobody in here has seen this before. But I've listed about 8 or 10 examples of things that have happened in Oklahoma. I've been asking this question in a different way, and I'm just getting dictionary definitions. So now I'm going to make them apply it. This situation here, what kind of capitalism was that? This situation here that happened, what kind of capitalism was that? So it's very valuable for us to find out who these good people are and then help to elect them. So the surveys are important. Then we give awards out. And we give awards out to outstanding lawmakers. Lawmaker of the Year, Freshman of the Year, Runner-Up. Lawmakers that maintain their lifetime scored at 90 or above. But we have 2 other awards, the dubious Rhino Awards. And so anyone that doesn't have this 60 or above is nominated as a Rhino, and our members actually elect one person to be the Rhino in the Senate and the House. First time we did this in the House, State Representative Terry Ingmeyer from Stillwater. He got the trophy, created all kinds of press and problems for him. Next year he won it again. And by the time I could get to the Capitol with the trophy, I walked in. The press had been calling for comments. He was on the phone with his legislative assistant, and her mouth dropped on him and said, "You're not going to believe this. This guy's standing in front of my desk with a trophy. You want to talk to him? Hands me the phone. Representative Ingmeyer, I have your 2nd annual Rhino Award." He said, "You can take that trophy and shove it up here, and I'll leave the rest of it up to you." I said, "Representative Ingmeyer, I'm going to leave it here, and you can do with it what you want after that." In the packet, I have 4 years. This is the ranking. 57 Republicans, 44 Democrats in the House, 24 Senate Republicans, 24 in the House. The ranking, most liberal and most conservative. I can tell you, 4 years ago in the House, there were 18. 3 years ago, there were 17. 2 years ago, there were 8. This year, there's 7 or 8. Over in the Senate, 4 years ago, it was almost half and half. And then it cut. In the last 2 years, there's only been one senator. The leadership of Senator Brogdon, he is literally the moral conscience of the Senate. And if you haven't noticed, if you haven't spent any time with him, he's a fairly friendly guy, pretty well liked, and he's pretty persuasive on his fellow senators. Not quite as good as I'd like him to be, but he's pretty persuasive. I mean, we do have Ron Rhino here. I don't know why you can't work on him. But the point is this. We have moved our state legislature to the right. We have a better quality state legislature in the state of Oklahoma. We've informed them, we've moved them. And you know what the best thing of it is? The Oak Pack meeting has become a recruiting grounds for the John Birch Society because the people that are drawn to Oak Pack and come to Oak Pack are the very kind of people that easily move the next step up, and that's into Oak Pack. And that's how we've worked with folks to do what we've done in the state of Oklahoma. Thank you very much.